There was once a man I used to know in my youth. He was the very soul of every gathering, the spark that lit up every room. Any party without him seemed dull. Any story told in his absence went unheard. He had the gift of conversation, generous, vibrant, always willing to help others without asking for anything in return. People called him the good man of the neighborhood. But then, one day, he disappeared. No one saw him at the familiar coffee shop anymore, nor did he show up in the family group chat or at weddings and village events. He cut off Facebook, changed his numbers, and withdrew from every relationship. Rumors began to swirl. Some said he'd been betrayed, others whispered he'd failed, or that he'd fallen into depression. But the truth was different. I met him again 5 years later, on a gentle, rainy afternoon. He now lived in a small house on the outskirts of town, growing vegetables, reading books, and sometimes teaching music to underprivileged children. He no longer had the dazzling presence of his younger days, but his eyes shone with a strange, peaceful light. I asked him, "Why do you live so withdrawn?" He simply smiled and said, "After a long stretch of being busy pleasing others, I finally chose to be friends with myself." This man had realized something profound. When you pass through enough pain, you learn that being cold isn't a flaw. It's a sign of maturity. Not because you've run out of love, but because you've learned to love the right people at the right times. Not because you want to isolate yourself, but because you need to keep what's truly worth holding on to. There are 3 kinds of coldness that can help you live more strongly, and 4 subtle traps that can quietly hold your life back unless you wake up to them. This is the journey to free yourself from invisible constraints and truly take ownership of your life. First, be cold with yourself by narrowing your relationships. People often think that as you grow older, you should widen your social circle and network broadly. But at some age, you realize that having more people around isn't a blessing. It's a burden. Sometimes being in the crowd doesn't bring peace, but only adds turmoil to your soul. I once visited an old artist who lived in seclusion in a wooden house on a hillside. No longer seen on TV, he skipped talk shows, didn't do advertisements or live streams like his peers. People assumed he was forgotten, but in reality, he was living his peak, the peak of freedom. His small house had little more than an old cassette player, no computer, no smartphone, no Wi-Fi. I asked, "Don't you need to connect with the world?" He smiled calmly. "I've connected enough. Now I choose to connect with myself." Once a sought-after name with lucrative contracts, he turned it all down. He understood that true value isn't in the spotlight, but in those moments alone, living fully with his passion. Every year, he disappeared for 3 or 4 months without warning. During that time, he did 3 things: read, exercise, and write music. Friends called him eccentric, cold. But the truth was, he was protecting his own rhythm from meaningless chaos. He didn't need others to understand, he just needed to be himself. This kind of coldness isn't about locking yourself away in loneliness, but about simplifying, trimming excess connections, and cutting out relationships that only bring noise. In our youth, we often mistake being surrounded by many people as proof of our worth. But as we grow, we realize that being alone isn't as scary as feeling lonely in a crowd. We spend too much time pleasing others and forget our own feelings. We make friends not out of resonance, but out of fear of being left behind. We force smiles in conversations that have long lost their meaning. We silently endure relationships that have been rotten for years. So why not dare to be a little cold to purify your life? Coldness means refusing unnecessary appointments, bravely not replying to messages while you meditate, and having the courage to leave group chats that are filled with endless, pointless arguments. I once met an old friend, a former media wizard at a major company. He had left the industry and opened a small tea house by the lake. He told me, "I used to have thousands of contacts, but when I was tired, I didn't know who to call. Now I have only 12 numbers, my mother, 1 close friend, and my family doctor. Life has never felt so light." He smiled coldly but with relief. letting go of others' expectations, stopping the fear of what people might think, daring to say no without guilt. These are the marks of maturity. Just like a phone battery, your spirit has limits. If you use it up on too many people, spread it across too many emotions, you'll soon be drained. Being cold at the right time is how you recharge your inner world. Second, be cold with others by daring to say no and even turn away. When my aunt sold a barren plot of land in her hometown, suddenly the whole village seemed to wake up. Relatives and old friends she hadn't heard from in years started visiting. Calls that had been cold for years became warm and friendly. Distant cousins, even neighbors who barely nodded before, now dropped by with all sorts of requests and reasons to borrow money. At first, my aunt was soft-hearted. Memories of old kindnesses made her reluctant to refuse. But as she kept saying yes, the requests multiplied, and over time, more than 2 billion dong slipped away from her savings. But what hurt her most wasn't the money. It was how people turned their backs when she finally started to say no. When she refused a neighbor's request for another loan, he threw a stone through her window at night. The glass shattered, cutting her foot. She called the police, but no one would testify. Even those she had helped stayed silent. That New Year, some gathered outside her house, cursing her as stingy and rich, until she didn't want to leave the house anymore. Sometimes being too kind is a trap. The world doesn't run on kindness alone, but on boundaries. If you can't say no, you'll be taken advantage of until you're empty. We're taught to be gentle, to yield, to avoid conflict. But if you don't set limits, your kindness will only feed the greed of others. On the internet, someone asked, what's the best way to resolve conflicts? The highest rated answer: when the time comes, turn your back. Don't be afraid of being called cold or heartless. Those who respect you won't ask for unreasonable sacrifices. Those who only want to take don't deserve a place in your life. I once had a friend who borrowed money and never returned it. The next time he asked, I told him plainly, I have the money, but I won't lend anymore. He never messaged again. Some might call that stingy, but I learned the value of saying no. Refusal isn't cruelty. It's a declaration that you respect your time, energy, and emotions. It's a fence to protect your inner world from those who don't know when to stop. Third, be cold with the world. Learn to filter, to shield your mind, and to start over. In an era of overwhelming information and constant noise, you don't have to know everything. Disconnect from negativity, from toxic news, from endless comparison. Protect your mind and you'll find peace. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to start again with a clear mind after letting go of all that no longer serves you. Finally, beware of 4 hidden traps: constant complaining, placing hope in others, clinging to outdated experience, and narrow-mindedness. These are the snares that hold you back, often without you realizing. Complaining only deepens your wounds. Hoping in others prepares you for disappointment. Relying solely on past experience blinds you to new opportunities. And short-sighted thinking makes you trade your future for fleeting gain. In the end, coldness is not about indifference or harshness, but a deliberate choice to protect what's good in yourself. It is a higher survival skill, learning to say no, to walk away, to filter, and to start anew. You don't need many friends, but you must have peace in your mind. You might not stand out in the crowd, but you must shine in your own inner world. It's not about being less kind, but about being wise enough to keep a warm heart only for what truly matters. May you learn to live with a gentle coldness, strong but not harsh, independent, yet still warm in pause. Because in the end, reasonable coldness does not distance you from others. It brings you closer to your true self.